Perhaps some people didn't notice, but they really did not care. Why should they? At the end of the day, the cellar of my house belongs to me. It is my kingdom, only I can enter. That is what everyone knew who lived in the area. That includes my wife, my children, and my tenants. And none of them ever managed to force their way into my kingdom or ask me what I did there.
Damn, am I that loud?
Mm-mm. Good job. Good job.
He scared me a little bit. Very angry Hitler. This is Jen.
This is Becky.
This is Too Close to Home. We're going to talk about Josef Fritzl Part 2.
Part 2.
That was definitely Josef Fritzl talking about his kingdom. And Jimmy's very good Austrian-German accent.
No, that was Fritzl direct recording.
Direct. Quote, unquote. Let's hit them sauces real quick. Secrets in the Cellar by John Glatt. Wikipedia, the Canadian Legal System, The Scotsman, The Independent, Spiegel Story, The Telegraph UK, The Guardian, Spiegel International, Graphic News, BBC, Reuters, The Daily Mail, and Tidskrifta, which is the journal translated from German.
Very good, very good.
Why can I do that fast, but I can't fucking talk out like a regular sentence?
You can. Just nobody said it was like a very clear, coherent sentence.
Well, good point. It's a really good point there. Last time we talked about Joseph, who he was, his shitty beginnings, his right first with me and their children, including Elisabeth. Let's pick up there and talk about her right after her being recaptured, basically. Her and her best friend had like skipped off to Linz and then to Vienna. Not the salsa, just the place. Sorry, I couldn't. It's an opportunity. The Viennies. So after that, there was about 18 months left in our hospitality program. So she felt that if she could just stick it out, she could be free soon enough, as she would be a legal adult by the end of it. That summer, she would spend her time working at the local hotel in Ungarth, Austria, which was further away. So she had to stay there away from her dad. Her coworkers would recall her as a troubled party girl. She could throw down more schnapps, beer, and wine than most, probably to drown out the horrors of her existence, but to everyone else, it was a wild child sowing her seeds. Elisabeth had been known to sneak out with boys and just spend nights drinking and dancing so hard that she could barely work the next day. She seemed to do anything.
Been there, done that.
Sometimes you just gotta throw down, you know what I mean, though? The manager finally was like getting over it. It was like, get your shit together or you're going the fuck home to Amstetten. That made her do a complete 180. Like, she went to her friends that night in tears, being like, I can't go home. If they try to send me home, I'm gonna fucking run away. Please don't. So she started getting her shit together. Like, I'm gonna get on my P's and Q's because I don't want to go back. In 1983, that fall, Elisabeth returned to work at the Rosenberg Diner just as Joseph was adding the finishing touches on her dungeon. He had created a crude ventilation system, wired it.
Could you imagine going to work every day and trying to like get your life together to get the fuck away from him? And unbeknownst to you, he's building a dungeon to lock you in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And just probably whistling while he works.
yeah.
Just gleefully. He had created a crude ventilation system. When I say crude, it was barely functioning.
It was like a old dryer,
Like
the
a little,
that just like went above ground.
basically. Just a hole.
Yeah,
What he wired
straws
it
in the ground.
He wired it for electricity. He installed a stove, a fridge, a toilet, as well as a furnace to burn trash. He lined the walls.
Oh, great! We can burn trash down here in this poorly ventilated room. Thanks.
It's going to be delicious. He lined the walls with cork and other materials to conceal the sounds. He even dug a tunnel to the original 1800s cellar so that he could expand the bunker later on. In the 6 years,
Thinking ahead.
6 years of working on that dungeon, not one neighbor said a word or asked what he was doing. They minded their business despite watching him use an industrial winch attached to the top of his home to lower large slabs of concrete for this dungeon. He would recall, perhaps some people did notice, but they really did not care. Why should they? At the end of the day, the cellar of my house belongs to me. It is my kingdom. Only I can enter. That is what everyone knew who lived here. That includes my wife, my children, and my tenants. And none of them ever managed to force their way into my kingdom or ask me what I did there in my best American accent. Thank you. Honestly, during writing this, it made me think of my own relationship with my neighbors or lack thereof. And that any of these bitches could be building a sex dungeon under their homes as we speak. I won't ask either, though, because I've already exceeded the max friends I have. So I avoid any and all interactions with my neighbors.
And by Mac's friends, I mean 3.
Exactly. That might even be your first time.
That might even be loosely 3.
So in July 1983, the team of planning inspectors would visit and sign off on this bomb shelter, ensuring his grant would go through. It would be a year of final preparations before Elisabeth would ever enter the dungeon.
Like hanging curtains, picking out carpet swatches.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
You know, I want to make sure that the vibe, the feng shui.
Final walkthrough. Kitty.
In April 1990, April 1984, Elisabeth would reach her 18th birthday, and I'm sure at this point she could nearly taste her freedom. Her father had been less severe in the few months of her 17th year, and she had planned to move in with her older sister Ulrika at the end of her 3-year course. She had begun drinking again, but not like before. She was social and had a steady boyfriend. At this point, it feels like she was celebrating the end of her captivity.
Huh.
She got a new haircut, which is a page boy style. I don't know if you know what that is.
I'll look it up while you...
You think ABBA is basically that, like
okay.
Renaissance bowl cut. That's just shaggy, like a long bowl cut.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah. And she was happy by all accounts, looking forward to the future. Why do you think Joseph loosened the reins on her? Well, to further establish that black sheep behavior of partying and dating boys. Everything he
and then
did.
let her guard down.
Yeah.
She's not so like...
Exactly. Everything he did or didn't do was done because of his meticulous plans. He had finished the cellar with the exception of a 2-by-3-foot door that would be the final seal of the dungeon, and now he was ready for the plan to go into action. By then it was June, and Elisabeth was preparing for her final exams. She had already been promised a job in Linz should her final grades be high enough. And this is when she meets Andreas Krutzig. The young 18-year-old cook fell in love with her really quickly. She was beautiful, but serious and withdrawn. However, within weeks, she would be more relaxed and opening up to Andreas as they spent more time together. It was a tad bit difficult because the school was very strict with keeping the sexes apart. He knew that any boy caught in the girls' dormitory would be immediately expelled, so they would sneak around and have make-out sessions when they could, as the young love blossomed. They would eventually find a private and quiet spot in the woods where they would spend hours kissing and talking about their lives. Despite getting hot and heavy, the years of sexual assault plagued her, and she could never cross the line into sex despite her wanting to bring it to the next level. I know this is crude to speak of, but I really don't think many realize how much rape and sexual assault affects every part of a victim's life. It reminds me of the scene from Django Unchained when Dr. Schultz is seeing flashes of a slave being torn apart by dogs while everyone else in the room is eating their white cake as if it had never happened. I can imagine as things progress, those images and feelings of fear and pain probably flashing in her brain, triggering her so deeply. Not to get ahead of myself, but to this day, she cannot completely relay her story due to the severe trauma she withstood and will probably never be able to fully escape the mental dungeon that Joseph put her in. Andreas would speak about what she did relay. Her father was strict, that she had run away when she was 15. She would talk about her love and closeness with her siblings, but never the full truth of what they were being put through. Their love grew fast and strong, and they began speaking about running away and getting married. After completing their exams, they attended a student party together, but Elisabeth was inconsolable because she had failed one of the tests. He tried cheering her up, and despite her fear of losing that waitress job she was promised, she was like, you'll be fine. You just need to get back on the horse, take the exam, you'll be fine. That night, she decided she wanted to stay with him, and she just spent the night. And the next morning he spent the night with her at her apartment thing. The next morning, Joseph and Rosemary were on the front doorstep. They had not told her, but they came to get her. And so she couldn't even say goodbye to him, really. She didn't want him to see Andreas because she knew she would get the shit beat out of her. So she kissed him, said that she'd ride him. He was like, fine. And she walks out and goes with them. He didn't realize that seeing her be driven away in Joseph's silver Mercedes would be the last time he would ever see her. The final letter she wrote would be to a friend, Ernest, who spoke of her plans of, going on with her boyfriend and everything. She was intending on finishing her courses, moving in with Ulrika, but she was still kind of stressed over exams, and that she would attach a photo of herself keeping in touch. Andreas wrote to her a few times, speaking about his love for her, that he wanted to marry her and settle down, talking about the future life together, but she would never read them because Joseph had gotten there first and was furious at the thought of another man touching her. He became vicious and wouldn't allow her to go anywhere but work, and he began beating her again. So those lanes that he had loosened immediately came back. She told her friends about her fears and the beatings, and she had told them that she had planned to run away. August 28th, 1984 would seem like a normal day, but it was anything but. As she prepared for her shift, her father asked her to help him move a heavy steel door down to the basement. When I say heavy, a motherfucker was 600 pounds.
Jesus.
And you're talking about an 18-year-old girl and a man who's like in his 50s. Okay? Who is definitely got soft hands. He was not the hardworking types. At most, the most work he had ever done was put together this sex dungeon.
That's what I was about to
And
say.
it was shoddily done. I know, like, everybody keeps talking about how he was so great at concrete and everything like that, but then they keep talking about how shitty it was put together and how awful it was health-wise on them. And I'm like, but was he really a good engineer then?
Well,
was
you know,
he?
putting a concrete foundation down is one thing. Building the whole house is another.
You're right. You're right. So as she prepared for her shift that morning, her father asked him to move a steel door down to the basement. She followed him down 3 flights of stairs, helping.
Jesus Christ. 3 flights of stairs carrying a 600-pound door? Sir, I'm going to let it go and hope it falls on
I hope it does. Take
If
you
she
out of
didn't
the
know what
corner.
was coming, she would have.
Oh, I'm sure she would have. And so when they get and they place the door, right, he grabs the back of her head with one hand and then has an ether-soaked rag with the other and slaps it on her face. She passes out. He throws her in the dungeon, shuts the door, and then drags her in.
God, that's almost as bad as digging your own grave.
I can't even imagine.
Mm.
She would awake on the mattress in a windowless room where he would rape her several times before turning off the light and closing her up in the room behind 8 heavy doors for several days. Being windowless in the dark and having been drugged, the concept of time and day just completely dissolves from existence.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
And that really does, like, people don't realize how much the sun and the moon do affect your health.
Uh-huh.
It's not a witch's dog, okay? This is scientific facts on facts on facts. I'm a Virgo, Scorpio rising. Sorry. He would return and sadistically rape her and beat her, all while her being manacled to a fucking wall, like on a mattress, just stuck in the dark. If she resisted, he would just beat her harder. He'd leave her a bowl of food scraps and leave her. She would scream and scream and scream until she became hoarse and eventually just gave up because he had soundproofed it so fucking well. Once she became more docile, he changed up her handcuff to a chain wrapped around her waist that was just long enough to use the bucket in the corner to relieve her in her 15-foot by 15-foot cell.
Mm.
Meanwhile, Rosemary was immediately concerned when Elisabeth disappeared and quickly went to the police, with Joseph feigning concern all alongside her. They would search train station, bars where she worked, talk to her friends, all for naught.
They never searched the house?
They searched the house, but this is like a hidden door. The door that, like, he put her in was like 2 foot by 3 foot, and shoving her in there. And then there was like a shelf that would go in front of it. So by then, by him locking her in there, shutting it up, it would look like there was nothing there. You would just go to the bottom of the stairs and it'd be a room. If you
They
recall,
should have been pulling light switches and books.
that's what I would do.
Secret door.
It's my favorite thing in the world. Let me see what this book do. Is it going to give me treasures or it's going to fall out and hurt my toe?
Probably my toe.
But you know, I keep hoping.
That's right.
Now, if you recall, she had mentioned she was, run away, had a history of running away, had told other people that she planned on running away. So to them, they probably thought she finally did it. She got away and she's just being safe, so she's not communicating. Rosemary would even visit a fortune teller who couldn't, I guess, spiritually find her.
Because she was behind
all that metals.
And metal.
It's like
spirit.
Fucking Professor Xavier with like the mind, the guy in the wheelchair on X-Men.
It's like the vault and ghosts, how the ghost can't go through it.
Exactly.
That's what
Can't do
was. It's impenetrable to spirits. Just bringing it to, understanding people can get.
Exactly. Also, we gotta bring it down. This is hard. This is difficult. So, in the first few weeks between searching, he would come down with scraps of food for Elisabeth and, of course, to rape her again. And she had no choice but to submit or starve to death as she was tethered to a pole in the dark. His ventilation system was so crude it made breathing difficult for her. The lack of oxygen tired her and made finding back almost impossible, especially after not getting enough food. You're definitely not getting enough oxygen. I don't know how much water he's given her. She's going to get weak real quick. Andreas kept writing without receiving a response and became concerned, so he called her home in Amstetten. Joseph answered, said she wasn't available, and to not call again, hangs up. Left him kind of confused, hurt. He assumed that she just ghosted him. She ran off without him. He talked about that, like when he found out all those years later how much it broke him. That it wasn't that she left him, it was that she was trapped.
Oh, sure. I'm sure there's some guilt there.
So by September, she had pretty much resigned herself to the fate of being in his dungeon forever as a sex slave. So this is August to September, a month. On September 21st, the day before my birthday, it would be cemented by her father. He came down with a pen and paper, and he would dictate a letter for her to write. It would say that she had joined a cult, don't look for me, and she didn't want to live at home anymore. And if they look for her, she was going to fucking leave Austria, so get the fuck out of here. And then he had...
What do you think you would do in that situation? Do you think you would write the letter?
No. First of all, I'm too weak.
Do you think you would write it with the
I'm
hope
too weak.
of...
I'm so weak, I can't. Fuck you. No.
Like being able to escape in the future. Like, let me just do what you say and maybe I can gain some trust and eventually get out. Do you think that's what your mindset would be? Or no way to even gather because never experienced anything close. I always wonder about that stuff. Anyway,
You never know what you're going to do. I would like to think that I would be like, fuck you, but I probably would be writing it. I probably would have not even... He wouldn't have had to give me no ether-soaked rag. I would have been walked up in that bitch.
I was going to say, first of all, you would have carried the door willingly and...
Like, sir, you're an old man. Sit down. Let me get this for you.
Exactly what would have happened.
I'm so damn dumb.
Then you would have been like, let me go in there and sweep for you.
No, but if you sit there and tell me you have a business opportunity that's going to bring me back money, fuck you. Get out of here with your scam. My money is far more important than my life.
$1 to 8 people.
Damn it, man. I don't want it to be this way. It just happened. So
look at the draw.
It really is. And Jimmy is. And you are so fucking lucky.
We are.
So he had Elisabeth address and the envelope to him. And then he drove to Brandenburg Am, Hitler's birthplace. And he mailed the letter so the postmark would lend credibility. One of the many ways he used to conceal his crimes. Days later, Rosemary opened the letter, relieved that she was okay, and then Joseph, of course, gave it to the police. He even visited the local newspaper and asked them to run a story on his missing daughter, supplying a photograph.
Sick son of a bitch.
Interpol did get involved for a short time, but they couldn't find a lead on the cult, and since she was an adult, they said, sorry, fam, sounds like she just left on her own accord. Joseph loved to tell everyone the hell she gave him as a troubled child, and how she had run away with a cult, and how this had affected her mother and their family. And some people actually believe the lies he wove, thinking she probably was off being wild, involved in risky behaviors like drugs and such. But I don't give a fuck. I don't care if you do drugs, or you do this, or you do that. Nobody deserves not to be found. Like, we all deserve to have a name, unless you're just like Joseph here. Like that deep of an evil human being. You know what I mean? I don't care if a kid's a trouble kid. They deserve to be found.
I agree, but I think having her pen that letter certainly helped his case because if...
She sounds definitely combative in it.
I tried to find my nephew and he wrote a letter. He joined a cult and I tried to find him and even the police couldn't find the cult. I mean, not saying I wouldn't stop looking, but at some point, and especially if you're not close to it, you're gonna be like, well, they can do what they want to do.
Yeah, I gotta move on with my life. I can't sit here forever.
I mean, we hear countless stories of people's family members getting addicted to drugs and wandering off and they can't get them back. And it sounds like, this was him trying to play that up. That was the situation.
Elisabeth's friends were terrified to speak about Joseph and the abuse that she had told them about. I mean, I was watching this, there's this documentary that just came out, and it was a girl who was murdered by her stepfather, and her half-sister didn't believe that her father had killed her all these years, and then figures out that no, he had killed her all these years. And he'd done kind of like the same thing, framed her as a troubled child. And I'm just sitting there like the shock on that girl's face, like when she realized when it finally hit her that her dad pretty much was a sicko.
Yeah.
And there was all these signs all these years that she completely missed. Like in one video there was they're in the woods together and it's just the sisters and the dad. And the girl yells, "Sarah, Dad's a pervert."
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It just makes me think of that. It's just
because there's videos, home videos. Yeah.
It's crazy. As everyone else resumed, but people have eventually just had to move on with their life. You can't just sit there forever. So, as everyone resumed their lives, sure that Elisabeth was off gallivanting in a cult while she sat in a damp, wet dungeon where she would be visited every 2 to 3 days for her to be raped. Over time, their relationship changed, with psychologists believing she suffered from the classic Stockholm syndrome, that her psyche took her day-to-day existence and normalized it for survival. John Glatt, the guy who wrote my source material, Secrets in the Cellar, he said it best. Well, I didn't get beaten as bad today. Well, I got fed today. Today wasn't the worst day underground. And, I mean, our brains will do some fucking mental gymnastics to find equilibrium. Many victims of abuse do this as well. You do something enough, it becomes normal, and not as big of a deal versus someone who has never experienced abuse who would stand up at the first sight of danger. Joseph pivoted from his violent rapes, where he would beat her and treat her like an animal, to bringing her clothes and small gifts, making the rapes less brutal, and using her survival instincts against her to make her his new docile wife. He had stopped using contraception at this point, fully hoping to impregnate her and sire a new family. She didn't know that. She's just like hoping, okay, well, if I get pregnant, he'll have to go take me for an abortion because surely he will not want me to do this.
Mm-mm.
He perhaps saw her for the first time as his new wife that was under his control for his every whim. It became a routine, him coming down and laying her on the bed and raping her without any resistance, noting she would whimper at most. And then when he was finished, she was scarfing down the food from her starvation. He would regale her with the happenings upstairs, how her siblings and mother were doing, just like it was fucking casual dinner talk.
Pillow talk.
Above ground, he would rent out apartments to people during Elisabeth's imprisonment. Now, they had very strict rules. You couldn't go anywhere near that fucking cellar, dog, or the backyard for any reason whatsoever, or you'd be evicted on fucking sight.
That's a red flag. I'd be like telling the police, like, you need to check this dude out. There's some reason he doesn't want us to.
Mm-hmm. Then he said, he had a strict no noise after 10:30 p.m., no pets. Again, immediate evictions if violated. Despite this, the tenants from this period would recall weird noises from the cellar, but being afraid to incur his wrath upon them to inspect. He would end up having over 100 tenants move in and out during her imprisonment at this time.
And not one called the police?
Not a one.
That's a shame.
One of them, like they were talking about later on, he was sobbing in tears, saying like, I should have known, and all the things that he saw but didn't put together. Like, I was like, oh, I was going to be mad at you, but you seem like you bad enough.
Seem like you got enough guilt.
I'm sorry, dog. I mean, you could have saved lives, but I don't want to tell her I told you so. The Fritzl children and Rosemary were also banned from the cellar, as it was his office. His sister-in-law, Christine, recalled that he would go down nightly at 9 p.m. to work on inventions to sell to businesses to make money, but that no one was allowed to disturb him, not even for a fucking cup of coffee. Christine said he would spend whole nights down there, and considering what the family had endured, I'm sure they didn't mind his absence and were not really interested in hanging with his office anyways.
Yeah.
So, as you recall, he had been vocal with everyone that he no longer wanted children with Rosemary. She had been severely depressed after Elisabeth disappeared and gained weight, to which he loved to cruelly degrade her in public in front of her family, friends, and strangers alike. He would state that she was disgusting, and I'm sure the feeling was mutual.
Oh, I'm sure.
In September 1986, 2 years after her imprisonment, Elisabeth would become pregnant. This was devastating for her, causing a deep depression. She would miscarry at 10 weeks, and Joseph would cruelly throw the fetus into the incinerator and leave her in the dark as punishment.
Jesus.
At this point, Joseph had become a well-respected businessman who began showing signs of his age in form of losing hair. Being so vain about his manicured style, he would get a hair transplant. He wanted to look good, for all these trips that he was fisted to be making to Pattaya, Thailand, that he would start regularly going to in 1987. I'm sure you heard of Bangkok, Thailand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of Pattaya?
Mm-mm.
It's basically a smaller version of Bangkok. Sex tourism in the East, and especially in Thailand, is widely known. While it's illegal, it is widely practiced and open and treated more like a business transaction. So basically, prostitution in Thailand is like jaywalking in America.
Don't do it again.
It's wild. Like, they have so many red light districts. They even have Boys Town, Boys with a Z. It's a very popular gay red light district. They have everything from like soapy massage parlors, karaoke bars, go-go clubs. Boys Town was just like one of his favorite fucking spots to go to. Many expats and regular vacationers would see him openly walking hand in hand with underage lady boys, as they call them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of these would be like in these karaoke bars, openly sitting there like, you want sucky sucky?
Mm.
And it was like this symbiotic relationship between these sex workers and these businesses to do it. So it's a very fluent thing, and nobody did anything about it. Like, nobody does anything about jaywalking here. It's just very odd. It's a very odd choice to me for somebody who imprisoned his daughter and seemed so violent against women, why he would go after ladyboys. It just seemed very out of his type. Not that it was, he can't have the option to be bisexual or be with somebody that is not,
I don't feel like he has a type.
No.
So you're trying to put him in a
maybe
class
maybe
there,
that's it. Maybe I'm
Jim.
trying to put him in his box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like he has a box he goes in.
I don't think there's this Pandora's box, if anything. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Nothing you're telling me about him surprises me at this point.
No.
Just like, oh, okay, we'll add that to the list.
Oh, yeah. Once you hear daughter in dungeon had 7 children,
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. That's good. There's nothing else you could say.
Mm-mm.
Perhaps, people said he was a shitty tourist that everyone hates. He was rude. He was known for being a disgusting pervert. Listen, I'm very pro you do you, but international sex trafficking underage children is a very hard no for me. Anytime,
I don't typically kink shame.
No, but this time I feel like it's safe to do.
Yeah.
Anytime he would leave, he would stock the freezer with food items and warned her if she messed with the lock, a deadly gas would be released to kill her.
Let me go mess with it right away.
Right, like, kill me now.
Yeah.
He also told her that should anything happen to him, there was a time release on the door to open so she wouldn't be trapped. Both statements were a lie.
Yeah.
While he was a clever engineer, he Pavloved her into not escaping, making sure if he was to die, the secret would die with him.
Oof.
And he kept that charade for a long time, even after the investigators went looking for these so-called booby traps. Not a fucking one. Like, dog, did you think we were going to look? We were just going to say, trust him. In 1988, Elisabeth fell pregnant again, which was probably excruciatingly painful emotionally. The love you have for your unborn child is so strong, but to know that child is not only a product of rape, but an incestuous one that was super violent. It had to be very difficult to kind of come to her terms with this. And I'm sure there's a lot of women that can't.
Yeah.
And there's nothing against them. It's just, that's fucking awful.
Yeah.
It's hard. Eventually, when she began showing, he stopped raping her, as he said he was no longer attracted to her, abandoning her in her last few months to deliver the baby on her own.
That's nice.
He left books, antiseptic, and towels. But the dungeon itself was disgusting and dark, and the risk of infection is astronomical.
Yeah.
Regardless, she managed to deliver the baby girl, cutting the cord herself and naming her Kirsten. 10 days after her birth, Joseph went to see his new child, and he said he expected more. And he meant it, because he would begin raping her shortly after the birth, which is another huge fucking infection risk.
Yeah.
When they say do not have sex for a certain length of time, they're not telling you because they want to be a buzzkill.
They're not trying to be a cockblock.
No, they're saying you could die. Ain't no booty worth that. Keep it in your fucking pants, man. Sorry. Get me off my soapbox. Joseph would begin to travel extensively to buy diapers and formula. You can't just go down to your fucking 7-Eleven and start buying diapers when all your children's is grown. Ain't no babies in your house. He would be cheap as fuck too. And when he couldn't make it to the store, he didn't have the money at the time, he would enter his tenants' apartments and steal their food. And people were like,
I know I had some Cheerios.
maybe I'm going crazy, you know what I mean? And then like he had spliced
Imagine the fights between those people in the house. I left my bag of crackers and they're gone. I know you fucking ate them.
Who ate
I
them?
swear to
The
God, I
ghost?
didn't.
The ghost in the room?
Exactly. Could you imagine? Because you know you didn't. He fucking
Then
knows
you feel
he
like you're
didn't.
crazy. Like, maybe I did.
Yes.
Maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe something's wrong.
You're like planning to make enchiladas that night and there's no fucking tortillas. And I'm like, I fucking know I bought them.
I
What
had a
did
whole
you do with
discussion
them?
with myself in the store. I know I had them.
Yes.
I know it.
I got receipts. Oh, I could just imagine the fights. I mean, he probably caused countless divorces too.
Oh, absolutely. And then you remember he had spliced the electricity too. So like whenever.
They're like, I've been out of town all month. How was my bill $400?
Exactly. So like with an ornery landlord though, I guess nobody felt safe enough to say a word about their light bills. One tenant, Joseph Leitner, he's the one that would be interviewed a lot, and he's the one that like beat himself up, was like in tears. He said that he had noticed these things, and he had asked other tenants, and of course they too were experiencing the same. So he worked in construction at the time. He was not there probably 12 to 13 hours a day, and the other 12 or 13 hours is sleeping, right? Well, he had his electrician friend come over. They turned everything off in the house, everything in the apartment off, and yet the meter kept running, and they couldn't figure it out. I ain't gonna say shit though, dog. Because he had a dog when he wasn't supposed to.
Oh, so
You can't go complaining if you're breaking the rules. And so his husky Sam, he had noted that his dog had done some weird things around this time that he had never done before. His dog was very friendly, not a vocal dog, but then would start scratching at the cellar door and whining and stuff like that.
Oh my God. I bet that guy does have so much guilt. He knew the electricity. His pup was trying to save her.
When later on, whenever he would go with these sex trips, he'd buy bulk food and he would use a wheelbarrow to get it from the car to the cellar. And he said he'd seen that. And he was like, fucking everything was there. And I was like, dog, nobody goes in thinking there's going to be a fucking sex dungeon. Okay, we all
You're
are
thinking maybe they're the crazy temple hat person building up their bomb shelter in case something happens.
like, call me crazy. We're all silver lining people, but nobody is going in it with the expectation of the sex dungeons. Okay?
No one is.
Nobody's going in and be like, this is
Except
where I get
me.
murdered.
I'd have been like, he got someone down there. I fucking know it.
And that's why you're my best friend. So you keep me from getting murdered because I will
Exactly.
be the first one in that cellar.
I'd be like, and Jen's been missing. I know it's her.
Where'd
in
Jen
there.
go? Oh God, she's already in there.
Exactly.
Jimmy, why didn't you put the leash on her?
And you got to get in there quick because she's going to refuse everything and they're going to kill her.
Kill me now! No! She's an idiot! Don't do it!
And then he's going to come in. She's going to be like, looks like your hair's thinning, old man. And it's going to be done. It's going to be done. She only has minutes left to survive. I know it.
So regardless, he did get caught with the dog and immediately evicted. But he so immediate that like he came home from work, the lock had changed.
Oh, shit.
Then he had to call the police so he could retrieve his things because he wasn't going to let him have his shit. Now, one thing he did note was that he would avoid the law at all cost. And so when he called the police, Joseph was like, just take your shit and go. Just take your shit and go. Like this fear kind of, he went from being this terrifying landlord to this whelp, you know? And as he was getting the shit out of his apartment, of course, Sam the husky's there. And Sam starts growling at Joseph. This dog that never makes noises, not a vocal dog, does not growl, has now been verbal, not only at the basement, but at this fucking janky landlord. Signs. We
Red
all know
flags blowing in the breeze.
dogs are true tells of person's intentions a lot of times. Not all of them. My dog's like me. She's an idiot. She will do anything for anybody. You treat, you say cookie, you say less. Within a few months of giving birth, Elisabeth was pregnant again.
Jeez.
Just like before, she was alone, giving birth in 1989 to Stefan. The heartbreaking thing to me is that she would write down the birth dates for her children and hid them in the cellar so she would have a record somewhere that they existed. And the thing is that it was a guesstimate of a date.
Yeah.
She didn't even know, like, their schedule was completely off. Like, you just don't have no internal clock after a certain
Yeah.
amount of time, I guess. It just breaks.
Yeah.
The only clock they had was Joseph coming and going.
Mm.
Over the years, as her siblings grew up, they left the Fritzl household one by one, leaving Joseph Jr. because he had a disability and could not live on his own. And you would think, well, at least he was considerate of that. But no,
Oh, of course he wasn't.
Joseph Jr. was his personal slave, basically, and butler. He was allowed to leave the home only once a week, if at all. So he had a dungeon. It just happened to have windows and no rape.
That's nice.
That I know of. Could have happened. Fritzl did have acquaintances, one being Anton Graf, who had known him since the 70s. He recalled how strict he was, evicting his tenants without blinking. There was no gray area for helping people. You break the rules, you pay the price. It's like he grew up in Nazi Germany. Just like the first time, he would resume raping Elisabeth afterwards, and remembering now, this is a singular room. So he's raping her in front of their children.
Oh, that's nice.
This is something all her children would grow up in the dungeon with, seeing their mother assault in front of their eyes daily. And they would not know how wrong this was.
Yeah, of course
this is
not.
all you can't know, but you can't miss what you don't know. If that's your normal, then that's your normal.
Do you think that's where the term granddaddy came from?
Stop it. I hated that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
In late 1991, Elisabeth would become pregnant again. This time, she gives birth to their second daughter, Liesl. With the population of the dungeon growing, real fast, she begged Joseph to expand it so that her children would have room and not to have to watch her be raped. He said, for show. So in 1993, he began to expand the cells via child labor. Unlike He didn't do the word this time. He had these little baby hands and her little hands, and they would just use their hands to dig out the tunnel, regardless of how dark and hard to breathe it in. Like, there's just no air. And then, of course, as the tunnel grows, there's even less ventilation because the ventilation stops at the entrance of it. So they'd have to go in and dig a little bit, and they'd have to go lay down. And then they'd go dig a little bit, and they'd lay down. They didn't have anything else. They have no toys. They have no TV. They have no magazines. All they had was Joseph and each other. And digging. In 1993, the kids would have been 3 and 5. Old enough to work in Nazi Germany, though.
Yeah.
Joseph would bring up the dirt and dump it in the garden, just one scoop at a time, basically. Which, I mean, they weren't scooping a whole lot with them little baby hands anyways. So, I mean, he was kind of doing like the Andy Dufresne.
I'm guessing they weren't real large either.
He's doing the Shawshank Andy Dufresne where he's like jiggling it out of his pants or something. So Joseph decided it was getting too difficult to keep juggling his two families, considering one needed diapers and formula secretly and often. And then he found out that if you adopt children, you get a considerable grant in Austria. So at 6 months old, he decided he would bring Liesl upstairs to be raised by Rosemarie.
I mean, you'd probably be somewhat happy that the child was leaving out of there.
Well, God knows what she probably thought he was doing, because he threw the fetus into the thing. God knows what he was planning to do with the baby. So now begins the task of creating a story to explain a baby that needs adopting out of nowhere. So he came down with a new note. This is how she knew that it was going to happen. Every time it happened, he'd bring down a note paper and start having her dictate her letters. And everybody who read these letters were all like, they sound like they were dictated. Like, he was so awful at it. It explained that she was still living in the cult and that she had a son and a daughter, but the cult told her that she couldn't keep a third. Like a child's a puppy and can be rehomed easily. She explained that she breastfed her baby for 6 months and then spoon-fed after, and that she was a good baby and to please love and cherish her. And with that, he picked her up out of Elisabeth's arms, carried her by her grandfather into the sunlight of the backyard for the first time in her baby life. He walked into the house with Lisa in a box saying he found her and a note on the front step. So off to the police they went with the note saying, with him demanding a handwriting expert to compare the writing and possibly a DNA test to make sure it was Elisabeth's baby. That always kind of confused me a little bit because that would have told on him.
Yeah.
But
I obviously wasn't smart enough to figure
unless
that out.
he was thinking like, oh, well, Rosemarie, she could I'll have her supply her DNA. That's all I can think. But for the next few months, the welfare office could check in on the family and make sure that the baby was happy. And they would end up visiting them like 20 times and noted nothing out of the normal. They did note that Joseph was barely there, though. It was mostly Rosemary. They felt they were comfortable and pleased with how well the baby was taken care of. So 1 year to the day that she came out of the basement, she'd be officially adopted by Rosemary and Joseph. They didn't do a background check. Not that it would have mattered because his rape conviction had been expunged.
Mm.
And later on, they do, like, as soon as it comes out, like, this is like, Austria is such a white people nation of no crimes, I guess, because they were all like, fuck, this is so awful. None of our laws can handle this.
Oof.
Like, what do we do? Like, they were having to pull out, like, laws from, like, the 17th century to figure out how to fucking charge this guy.
Did they call my guy Bugatti?
Yeah. I drove up in a Bugatti with an X. So, they would receive daily benefits on top of monthly benefits, which he learned is far more lucrative just to foster children because you would receive $1,500 a month. So he's looking for a way to make money always. He just was like, fuck, I should have just done more research. And fosters. Don't adopt.
Just shop.
10 years in 1994, her body had begun to fall apart due to living conditions. Her teeth had begun to rot. She was anemic. Her vitamin levels severely depleted. The lack of light really fucks with body sleep patterns, which send a ripple effect throughout, causing confusion, lack of coordination, fatigue, dizziness. Then you add the lack of ventilation, causing issues with breathing. Your oxygen saturation is low. This creates more problems with mental confusion, headaches, and emotional response. Their diet consisted of prepackaged processed food, not a damn fresh veggie or fruit in sight, which, I mean, like, that's cheaper than processed shit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can understand, but, like, you're going on your sex trip, you need to get a month's worth of shit, you know, because Europeans, they don't holiday for a week, they holiday for, like, 2 months.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're going, get these babies an orange, okay? God damn.
Don't you know anything about scurvy?
Yeah, well, Elisabeth did. She knew that the children having never seen sunlight could cause them to get rickets. So she's like, can you please bring me a UV light and vitamin D supplements? And he was like, I guess. And besides that, and the aspirin that it would always be available, that's the only medical anything support supplies that he ever would provide. Yeah, he brought the baby book, the antiseptic, the nappies, the towels, aspirin. Aspirin was to fix everything. First of all, you're not even supposed to give children aspirin.
No.
But she would give all her children aspirin because that's all she had. Which I don't know if they knew back then in the 70s. When did they figure out you can't give babies aspirin? I've been in like the 70s, I think.
I think it was later than that.
Because Whitey Bulger's son died like that. The mobster. He only had one child and he had a cold or something. The mom gave him aspirin and ended up that he died from that. What happens? Despite being in the dark and with limited resources, Elisabeth would keep the illusion that their lives were totally normal. She would teach the children to read and write, to speak, to walk. She'd regale them
the
with
80s. They found out in the 80s. So
so this was 94. So they would have known by then.
Yep, because in 86 is when the warnings came out not to give it to kids. So he knew.
He knew.
He didn't give a fuck.
He didn't give 2 fucks. So, despite being in the dark and with limited resources, Elisabeth would keep the illusion that their lives were totally normal. And she would teach them to read, write, speak, walk. She'll regale them with life was like above ground. She tried to describe rain, clouds, grass, all these things that we experience daily that they had never once seen. While she would be in the dark, damp cellar, Joseph was taking yet another trip to Pattaya, Thailand. When he would return, he bought gifts and pictures of his trips on the beach. While sitting there, bronzed from the sun, Elisabeth and her children suffered in a moldy and rat-infested cell. The ceiling was not even, and it was mostly 5'6" at the highest point, and electricity would randomly shut off for days at a time. And when the electricity shut off, she couldn't feed the kids.
Yeah.
There's no way to cook anything. So they completed the passageway from the original dungeon to the old 1890 cellar from Joseph's mother's home. The whole expansion process was like 10 years of them digging with their little baby hands. Okay. But like he'd open it up a little at a time. Like, all right, we got a tunnel in. Now we got to build in this rape room, because there was a rubber padded rape room with a camera.
Oh, nice.
So if you recall, he tore down his mother's home, put apartments on the top, but never filled the basement for the obvious reasons. And once they connected the cellars, they just had a little bit more room. It went from 380 square feet to 590 square feet. It would give them a new playroom, padded in rubber, and equipped with a camera and mattress to rape Elisabeth, while the children would have more rooms to expand out in. In that March 1994, with only aspirin for pain and her 2 children to assist, Elisabeth gave birth to a baby girl she named Monica. Could you imagine? Like, you have, I think at this point, they would have been 6 and 9. Having to help your mom, give birth at 9 years old? No, thank you. I can understand, okay, you're one of those crunchy moms that do those things. But this is we in a survival situation. I didn't even want to watch my own birth. Thank you.
Same.
She cut her own cord, as she'd done before, both Stefan and Kirsten excited to have a new sister. She would get to keep Monica until December, when Josef came down with a pen and paper for her to write a new letter. This would be the first she would learn that Monica would be taken upstairs, and as soon as she finished, he grabbed the baby and left. He would go and drop baby Monica into Liesl's stroller and with a note, and then went to a nearby payphone. This fucking kills me. In a whispering, high-pitched voice, he called from his home, where Rosemary answered. Pretending to be Elisabeth, she said, "Please don't be mad. I left her at your door. Please take care of her." Click. So it's just quiet, just high enough. She hadn't heard her daughter's voice in 10 years. So just like those scams that are happening right now, where people are calling, saying, and it sounds like your loved one, it's kind of like that. You really, in that moment, you're not going to really try to think about authenticating that person's voice.
Right.
Rosemary would go to the local police station, clearly surprised with baby Monica in tow. She told the police how shocked she was because Elisabeth was able to find their unlisted number that had been changed since Elisabeth had left. Regardless, with no suspicion cast on the Fritzls, they soon officially made Monica's foster parents, and just like that, Josef got a new monthly paycheck of $1,500 in state bennies. And that's where we're going to leave off, because next time we're going to head into the 1985 and take a launch into the millennium with the latter half of Elisabeth's imprisonment on part 3. Isn't this fun? This is so much fun.
So much fun.
Oh my God. Memories, right?
Yeah.
God, love it.
Me too. Great. Good times.
You guys, it's been delightful.
Yeah.
Don't forget to find us on our socials. Check out our merch. What are your own Too Close to Home stories? Were you in a dungeon? If so, do you need help?
Are you listening to this from a dungeon?
Blink twice if you're in danger. I won't be able to see it. But sometimes you have to admit it to yourself. You know what I mean?
Acceptance is the first.
Don't forget to rate and subscribe on all the platforms. And until next time,
stay safe.
Keep your head on a swivel.
Don't bring it so close to home, and I don't even have anything to say because I'm.
That you bring home your souvenirs of you and your Speedo from Pattaya Island.
Yeah.
In Thailand for your children to see.
Yeah.
Bye. God,
this is disturbing. It just never ends.
You're like, oh, surely can't get worse. Surely, right? It does every time. If you enjoyed this episode of Too Close to Home, don't forget to rate and subscribe to us on most platforms. Follow us on our social media at Too Close Home Pod on Facebook, at Too Close Podcast on Instagram, or if you have your own Too Close to Home experience, shoot us your story at tooclosetohome@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening.